Our topic is the Iraq War by Sadie Tourville, Brianna Fritch, and Hannah Robinson.
Alright, hey Klein, it's Sadie. I have causes of the war and why the U.S. invaded Iraq. So, one of the causes of the 2003 Iraq War was the 1990 Persian Gulf War. The U.S. never left the Middle East area after the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq because we wanted to make sure that Iraq wouldn't invade again, but also because we were in Iraq for a while making sure that they had no weapons of mass destruction. In 1998, after a few years of shaky compliance with the UN and their investigation of the weapons of mass destruction status in Iraq, Iraq stopped cooperating with the UN and refused inspections. Another cause of the war was Iraq's leader, Saddam Hussein. He had been known to use chemical warfare on his own citizens in the past, and after 9/11 in 2001, the U.S. believed Saddam Hussein to be connected to al-Qaeda and still worried about their weapons of mass destruction situation. Here's a political cartoon I found. I think it's pretty comical, if I do say so myself. Alright. In 2002, Iraq admitted to having multiple weapons of mass destruction programs, and in 2003, Bush issued an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, which pretty much said, release all weapons of mass destruction to the right authorities, which would be the U.S., release all al-Qaeda members to the U.S., and have Saddam Hussein and his sons evacuate the country in 2 days or we would invade. And on March 20th, 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq after they complied with 0 of President Bush's demands.
I have the Iraq War, which lasted from 2003 to 2011. First, I will briefly describe the general timeline of the war. The Iraq War lasted from approximately 2003 to 2011. From March to April of 2003, Iraq experienced the first of a series of brief wars. Troops from the United States and Great Britain invaded Iraq and successfully defeated the corrupt Iraqi government, called the Ba'athist government. After this war concluded, a longer war was led by U.S. because of the Iraqi insurgency. Insurgency is defined as a rebellion against authority. The U.S. began to withdraw its troops as violence began to decline in 2007, and by 2011 all troops were pulled out of Iraq. Now I will go into more detail about the war itself. First, the U.S. and Great Britain's troops invaded Iraq on March 20th, 2003 for 2 reasons. The first reason is because they thought the Iraqis had possession of WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. These weapons were thought to be able to kill hundreds of thousands of people at a time. The second reason was because we thought that Saddam Hussein was linked with al-Qaeda, the leaders of the 9/11 attack. For these 2 reasons, U.S. and British troops invaded Iraq in 2003. The troops were able to take over the Iraqi government, but those following Saddam Hussein formed their own troops to fight against them. In Baghdad's Firdos Square, about 3 weeks after the troops invaded Iraq, the U.S. soldiers, along with some Iraqi civilians, pulled a statue of Saddam Hussein to the ground. On May 1, 2003, President Bush declared that major combat operations in Iraq were completed. On May 23rd of the same year, hundreds of thousands of armed Iraqi men were sent into the streets to work together in Iraq. On June 22, 2003, U.S. troops killed Saddam Hussein's 2 sons. They had yet to locate Saddam himself. Finally, on December 14, 2003, Saddam Hussein was found in a hole near a house in his hometown, Tikrit. The U.S. troops successfully captured him. The U.S. discovered that there were no large amounts of weapons of mass destruction in the area on January 24, 2004, and they stopped the search. U.S. troops had been capturing and torturing some Iraqis in a prison called Abu Ghraib. On April 28, 2004, photographs of horrible torture to the prisoners done by Americans were leaked for the whole world to see. The U.S. used horrible torture methods such as pulling Iraqi victims on leashes, covering them with feces and urine, and pulling them on stretchers. Shiite Muslims were given control of the majority of the Iraqi government on October 25, 2005, with the election of their new leader. On November 5, 2006, Saddam Hussein was sentenced to death. Hussein was hung on December 30, 2006. He was convicted of guilty crimes against humanity. The Sunni Muslims rejoiced and the Shiites vowed revenge. On June 1, 2007, U.S. troops recruited Shiite troops to fight against al-Qaeda. This tactic has come to be known as the Awakening. The deadliest strike since the beginning of the war came on August 19, 2007, when suicide bombers killed and wounded hundreds of people. This day is now called the Day of Death. By 2007, there were 900 U.S. war casualties. In January of 2008, the de-Baathification policy was slightly changed. Some of those from the previous Baathist government were allowed to return to the current government. On the 1st of September in 2008, the U.S. military hands over some of their security responsibilities to the Iraqi government. This event led to the beginning of the U.S. withdrawing its troops. On November 4, 2008, Barack Obama was elected as the new President of the United States. In December 2008, the U.S. government announced that the total U.S. troop withdrawal would occur in 2011. 35,000 to 50,000 soldiers and Marines stayed in Iraq until the end of 2011 to train and equip the Iraqi soldiers. So on this graph, you can see how the troops began to withdraw and they were almost completely gone by 2011.
So I did the insurgency. The insurgency started in 2003 in Iraq and lasted throughout the war. The withdrawal of the U.S. troops caused violent conflicts with their central government. Coalition armies were targeted while literally Iraqi security forces such as Talibaners with the coalition were also targeted. Civil war violence decreased in the late 2008 and the insurgency continued throughout the U.S. withdrawal from Iraq in 2011. In December of 2011, a new wave of an anti-government insurgency came in that caused thousands of collisions. Most of the anti-government groups have been active during the Sunni insurgency following the fall of Saddam Hussein. The withdrawal. The withdrawal of the troops were also known as the Iraq State of Force Agreement. This was signed by President Bush in 2008. This established that the U.S. forces will be withdrawn from Iraqi cities by 2009. All of the troops were gone by December 2011. We left behind a stable and self-reliant Iraq with a representative government. A week after we left, 17 explosions rocketed and killed at least 65 people. We completely exited and left the door open for the Islamic State to take over. Americans' opinion shifted towards favoring a troop withdrawal in May 2007. 55% of Americans believe that the Iraq War was a mistake, and 51% of the registered voters favored troops withdrawal in 2007. Congress passed a bill to withdraw all of the forces, but President Bush vetoed this bill. President Obama said as a candidate for president, "I pledge to bring the war in Iraq to a responsible end. As I promised, the rest of the troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year." This was in 2011. In 2014, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, an offshoot is Al-Qaeda in Iran, is often blamed on a failure of Obama administration.
We have just explained the main events of the Iraqi War by describing the causes of the war itself, and the withdrawal of U.S. troops. Thanks for watching.